welcome everybody to today's 14th Annual Veterans Summit. My name is Beth Mead. I'm the president of the Local Impact Alliance, and I've been with the organization going on 11 years now, and I'm very pleased to say that two of the first people I met when I came to the foundation are these two women sitting next to me. And it has been my honor every year to have them here as speakers to talk about the changes in the veterans community and all of the things that you have available to you. So I'm going to pass it off to my vice chair of our board, Mr. David Hammond, to introduce our two guests. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll come to you and get those questions to our speakers so that they can answer them for you. For those online, if you could type your questions into the chat, I will read those, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Hammond. I'm the vice chair of the Canton Community Foundation. Want to welcome you to our 14th annual Veterans Summit. We're so happy that you're here. The way this works is we'll spend about half the time on presentations and then half the time for questions. So we've got some people online doing this by Zoom, so I'll walk around with a little mic. So just hold your hand up. I'll walk around, give you the microphone. You can ask your question, and then everybody online can hear your questions and the answers that we give. Couple of housekeeping things before we start. Want to thank the Shaw Family Foundation for the lunch, the box lunch. That's very generous of them to provide that for us. And we also want to thank Jerry Medved, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of HomeMD, and they do house calls for veterans. And she brought the desserts. And you can find those desserts. I think she walked around with them, but they're back on the back table if you'd like more. So without further ado, let's get started. First, I want to introduce our two speakers today. Pleased to have back Brigadier General Carol Ann Fausone. She's been a nurse for over 40 years and served her country for 36 and retired in 2011. She now owns the Veterans Advocate LLC, and they consult with businesses in matters related to VA healthcare, education, and programs. Our other speaker is going to be Christina Darrow. She's a veterans legal expert, a graduate of Wayne State University Law School, and has both a bachelor's and master's from the University of Michigan. She spent the last 18 years representing veterans on behalf of Legal Help for Veterans, both in Virginia and the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. So we're delighted to have them both here. And without further ado, we'll take it away.
If you guys can't hear me, just start waving, and then I will just shout louder if need be. I just don't really want to yell at people. So I gave this handout for you guys to have, and we'll have it available for those that are online as well. Unfortunately, it's stapled in the wrong order, so rip it apart, flip the first page, and the part of the page that says PACT Act Fast Facts, if you try to say that very quickly, that's actually your first page. So that's where I'm going to start, and you guys can follow along with it, because this is a pretty dense law. So I tried to break it down in bullet points, so it's a little bit easier to follow. And there's a lot of disabilities and diseases that they added, so I think the handout would be easier to follow along. And then if you guys have any questions, like I said, just pipe up too. I'm happy to answer them as we go along. It's not a problem at all. So as most of you probably know, it was pretty big news last August, 2022. President Biden signed into law, it's a long name, it's Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act of 2022. And so it's abbreviated PACT Act, so easier to understand, but it was in the news, lots of announcements from it. VA itself has been sending out a lot of paperwork and flyers on it, so you guys are probably aware of it, but just to give you a breakdown, because it addresses things both for veterans of the Vietnam era, but also those of the Gulf War era, and even radiation-exposed veterans. So the first one I thought we could start with was the Vietnam era veteran eligibility. And briefly, the act adds more than 20 presumptive conditions for burn pit exposures for... Sure. Oh, okay, no problem. Is this a little bit better? Okay. Okay. So basically, the act added 20 plus presumptive conditions for burn pit exposed veterans, for Agent Orange exposed veterans, and other toxic exposures. And it adds presumptive locations for those that sprayed Agent Orange for areas that sprayed Agent Orange, and also radiation. And it also requires VA to provide a toxic screening test to every veteran enrolled in VA healthcare. So it's a pretty comprehensive bill. Things like this don't come out of Congress very often, so it was a big year last year. For Vietnam veterans, because that's what we took a poll, and that's who the majority of the veterans here today are from, the Vietnam era, it adds 2 new presumptives, which means if you end up getting the disease and you were in areas where herbicides were used, you're presumptively presumed to have been exposed to the herbicide and you get the disease. So old diseases that you probably know about are lung cancer is one of the disabilities that's related to herbicide exposure. So if you were in an area where they used Agent Orange and you currently have lung cancer, you can get service connected for it. Doesn't matter that you were a pack-a-day smoker of Lucky Strikes. They don't care. It's presumptive. You'll get service connected. So VA added 2 more disabilities. One is monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance. And the other one, which is a really big one because pretty much every person over the age of 60 has it, is high blood pressure. It's otherwise known as hypertension. So if you were exposed to herbicides, and again, it's if you were in certain places, and we can discuss that later, and you currently have a diagnosis of hypertension, VA will presumptively service connect that disability for you. The Act also added 5 new locations to the presumptive locations of where Agent Orange and other herbicides were used. So obviously, you know, you all know Vietnam, the land of Vietnam, and then also the 12 nautical miles outside of Vietnam. VA has already conceded that's where they use herbicides. They've added 5 other areas. The first one is any U.S. or Royal Thai military base in Thailand between the dates of January 9th, 1962 to June 30th, 1976. The second area is Laos from December 1st, 1965 through September 30th, 1969. The third area is Cambodia at Mimik or Kampong Cham Province from April 16th, 1969 through April 30th, 1969. Guam or American Samoa, or in the territorial waters off of Guam or American Samoa from January 9th, 1962 through July 31st, 1980. And finally, Johnson Atoll, or on a ship that called it Johnson Atoll, from January 1st, 1972 through September 30th, 1977. So those are the 5 areas. They're pretty big areas because it adds an awful lot of veterans there. So that's a very big deal. It also makes it a lot easier to get service connected if you served at a Thai military base, because they allowed it before, but in very limited circumstances. And so now they've changed it and made it a lot easier. Any general questions about that, or can I move on to radiation veterans? We're good? We'll save the rest for later? Okay. They added 3 new presumptive locations for radiation exposure. And these are areas that the military sent for response efforts for cleanup. And so the first area is the cleanup of the, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but it's Iwanatik Atoll from January 1st, 1977 through December 31st, 1980. The second area is the cleanup of the Air Force B-52 bomber carrying nuclear weapons off the coast of Palomar, Spain, from January 17th, 1966 through March 31st, 1967. And the third area is the response to the fire on board an Air Force B-52 bomber carrying nuclear weapons near Thule Air Force Base in Greenland from January 21st, 1968 to September 25th, 1968. So those are the 3 areas that they've added for radiation-exposed veterans. And then finally, on the back page and the third page, It lists out for all of the Gulf War era and post 9/11 veterans all the disabilities that are now presumptive for exposure to toxins from burn pits, which is a pretty big deal because they burned all of the trash over there. Well, they burned more than trash over there, and it causes a whole host of disabilities and diseases, and they've added them now and made them presumptive. They've added 11 types of cancers. First one is brain cancer. The second one is gastrointestinal cancer of any type. The third one is glioblastoma. Head cancer of any type, kidney cancer, lymphoma of any type, melanoma, neck cancer of any type, pancreatic cancer, reproductive cancer of any type, and respiratory or breathing-related cancer of any type. They've also service-connected, presumptively, a couple other breathing type of diseases as related to burn pit exposure. Asthma, chronic bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, chronic rhinitis, chronic sinusitis, chronic bronchiolitis or obliterative bronchiolitis, emphysema, granulomatous disease, interstitial lung disease, pleuritis, pulmonary fibrosis, and sarcoidosis. And then the next two areas are all the areas are the presumptive areas where veterans would have served that are presumed to have been exposed to burn pits that then would allow you to become presumptively service-connected for all of those diseases and cancers that I just lit. So the big areas after September 11th, 2001 are Afghanistan, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Uzbekistan, Yemen, and the airspace above any of these locations. And then for the Gulf War veterans, on or after August 2nd, 1990, in any of the following locations, which are Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, the United Arab Emirates, and then again, the airspace above any of those locations. As you can see, the list of toxic exposures for burn pits is pretty extensive in terms of the diseases that result from exposure to that area. So again, you have the handout for you. If you need more, we do have more if you wanted to pass it along to other family members or anything. But I guess, like I said, it's a pretty dense bill, but that's what it is broken down very easily. So I guess I can answer more specific questions about it if you have in regards to exposure areas or diseases or anything of that. So burn pits are particulate matter in the air that they're breathing in, which if you look, the majority of those, all of your illnesses, 1 through 12, are all lung related. Your other cancers obviously are because of what they burned in the burn pits. That's where you're getting those from. But the Agent Orange is a different type of chemical base, and that's why there's certain diseases that are affiliated with that are not related to burn pit exposures. Yep, but it's not included in this bill, so it's not presumptive. However, it's okay. However, there's research out that's linking it to these burn pits, so you can kind of extrapolate and try to build your case off of that. She was asking if her husband's already at 100%, what's the benefit to adding another disability? Should he apply for hypertension as well? Sure. I would absolutely do so. It's not going to get him more money. However, it's service connecting him for a disability that he could potentially die from. If you have hypertension, you're at risk for a stroke. If you have a stroke, could potentially kill you. So it makes sense to get service connected for that, even if you're not going to be getting extra money off of it. So that's what you got to think about when you try to get service connection. It might not get you more money, but is it going to be something that's going to impact, surviving spouses and things like that? Or potentially, is it going to affect his ability to care for himself in the future, that maybe he needs aid and attendance benefits. You know, if it's a disease that's going to progress to require, home health care and things like that, then you could get more money for that. So it's always a good idea to ask questions like you are, with somebody. So the question is whether any of these illnesses affect the offspring. In terms of Vietnam veterans, yes. So male veterans, if you have a child with spina bifida, that is assumed to be related to herbicide exposure. Nothing else. Nothing else is considered right now. If you're a female veteran that was in any area where herbicides were used, there is a whole host of disabilities you can pass along to any children. Yeah, so this is not an the question is if there's other disabilities that are related to Agent Orange exposure. There's a whole host of them. My handout is not all the disabilities that are related to Agent Orange exposure. It's just strictly the 2 new ones that got added because of this bill, because that's just what we're talking about today is the PACT Act. But yeah, there's a whole host of them. Prostate cancer, lung cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, ischemic heart disease, all of those are all related. So the question is, there's some other diseases like multiple sclerosis, which her husband has, that are able to get service-connected if they show up within so much time after service. And her husband's outside of the time frame that multiple sclerosis is. You can always attempt to get service-connected. What it's going to be is it requires a medical opinion, and it's going to be on a case-by-case basis to list out what exposures and risk factors your husband had. And so only a doctor can do that, because they're going to have to go through your husband's whole history to figure out, is he going to be at risk for getting the disease because of something else, and I'm just making it up, but, like maybe genetics or maybe diet or exercise or, whatever risk factors there are for multiple sclerosis, other exposures, things like that. And so that's the sort of thing that would need to be explained. Or even, when did your husband get diagnosed? Could it have been latent and not really shown up within the 7-year period, but it was still there? Your husband was exhibiting symptoms, but they didn't piece it together at that time and didn't realize until later what it was. So, yeah. It would be a fight. It would definitely be a fight for it, and it would strictly come down to a medical opinion. And I wouldn't know, because the doctor would have to go through all of his medical records and figure it out, Yeah. Yeah. These, the question is why it took so long for the government to acknowledge all these. You mean these specific ones for the PACT Act, Vietnam veterans in general for herbicides? Both of those? Vietnam? So research. They're not going to presumptively service connect something that doesn't have medical research supporting it, because the amount of cash that goes out is astronomical. So even though they're the second largest cabinet, they're expending a lot of money on all these service-connected disabilities related to herbicide exposure. So they're not going to admit fault until there's a lot of medical research that's out there. And it takes a while to get that medical research. It's got to be like double-blind studies and, very long, protracted studies. They just added hypertension last year. There has been significant research on hypertension being related to herbicide exposure probably since the 80s. Yeah. So it also has to do with politics and who sits there and negotiates and what your bargaining power is as veterans and what you're actually bringing to the table. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that come into it. But that's just my opinion, since I fight against VA all day. But unfortunately, I don't know why either. I don't know why they did either. The VA and the DOD. Well, what you can do, you can come and talk with General Fausone and I afterwards, and maybe we can see what we can do. But Unfortunately, I know they do that to a lot of groups of people and even some veterans who, like this gentleman in the front row, he was in artillery and he was trying to get service connected for hearing loss and they denied him for years. VA's decisions don't necessarily make sense. That's why, a lot of times you require an advocate, not only just. Mhm.
Thanks, Christina. I will continue on. I'm going to flip to another area, and that is the caregivers. I am a nurse. As you heard, I served my country for 36 years, Air Force. But I think it's really important to look at all of these pieces. Something that just recently came out in reference to what Christina was talking about, and I believe your question, is the Camp Lejeune and the water. We're here today to talk about a small fraction of issues, but that was a huge decision related to the water issue that they researched for many, many years. And look at the lawsuits and the money, and that is a second generation and offspring results that are coming down, and families are being paid because of the results of living on that environment with the water over the years. So what I want to talk to you about today is the caregivers. And we have, and I'm going to have some handouts, and if I could have some helpers. My first handout is going to be addressing a whole bunch of issues that you might want to look into. It's ebooks that have been created on a whole bunch of different topics. They're all free. They're on the computer. We've created them at Legal Help for Veterans. They're on Camp Lejeune. They're on Agent Orange. They're on presumptives. They're on caregivers. They're on eligibility. They're on planning, how to protect all your documents for your children when that day comes, for burial rights. Hearing loss and tinnitus, we already heard that question. Burn pits. So these are all free. They're out there on the internet. Please take a look. They are rather extensive. They're very easy to navigate, but it's to help you get some information on maybe it's a topic or a concern for you and your family. The next item, I told you my topic is caregivers. This is a hot topic right now within the VA. It's a huge benefit for our veterans that are in the system and that have a disability rating 70% or greater. And if you don't even have a 70% or greater, you could still get into the system under the second program that I'm going to tell you about. So the caregivers, family caregivers program, you have three options. It's the extensive family caregivers, the general, and then the direct. So let me talk. First off is the family caregivers. And I've given you a grid, developed a grid to show you the difference. The simplest one, let me start from the back end. The simplest one is the direct. So you are the veteran. You want to control your own fate. You're 70% or greater. You have been approved by the VA for a caregiver. They're going to give you money. You manage your caregiver. You select the caregiver. You pay for the caregiver from the money that the VA gives you. But you have to fill out a monthly report. You turn it back in to the VA and you go along. As long as your hours stay the same. And what I mean by that is, if you get better, the VA might reevaluate you, and your 20 hours of care a week might be reduced, and you've hired a caregiver now, just had this problem, that you have been guaranteed them payment for, say, 6 months. That money might now be coming out of your pocket. On the reverse of that, if your health deteriorates, you have a stroke. This also happened as an example. One of my veterans had a stroke. They were in the hospital. They did have 20 hours a week. He had a stroke. He was in the ICU. He had to go to rehab. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to go back home. We had to re-petition the VA. His hours of care, he didn't know he could do that, then went up to 32 hours a week. You need to know the elements of the program, but it could be done. That's the direct care, where you manage your own money with what is given you with approved through the VA. But the most important step is to know your team at the VA. You should all know your team, your primary care team. Whatever your color is, red, purple, green, blue. You know your doctor. You should know, I know you know your doctor, okay? But more importantly, and I'm going to tell you this, not that I'm a nurse, know who your nurse is and know who your social worker is. Christina's a social worker by trade. Know your nurse and know your social worker, because this caregiver program is a social work-driven program. They will, and this is where it starts, they will approve the hours. They know your needs. And what I mean by your needs, and this was enlightening for me, I'm going to give you another handout. Everything operates around your activities of daily living. So, Christina and Dave are passing this out. Activities of daily living. And your social worker, your team at the VA should know these. If you're having trouble getting dressed, if you're having trouble bathing, if you're having trouble grooming, and you know what? Your spouse cannot do all of this 24/7. Trust me, your caregiver, if it's your spouse, is also going to be failing in health. If you're counting on that spouse to do everything, or if you're counting on your child to do everything. And it's going to come up as a problem. The veteran in back talked about aid and attendance. I want to give you a clue in a second. And we've got some agencies here. I want to tell you something, and if I forget, you help remind me. But I want you to look at this list: toileting, feeding, shopping for food, taking care of your house. All of those things need to go into consideration. Very important. Getting to the doctors. Those are the requirements that are needed. So you need to communicate those with your team. That's what gets you the hours. And then if you flip that over, the definition of unable to sustain in the community. This is what gets you approved. This is what increases your hours. And something on here, I have never seen this before. This raised my eyebrows after all these years. Go back to the activities of daily living. If you end up with a prosthesis or an appliance, let's say you've just had surgery, you lost a limb, you're having trouble, that adjustment in rehab also counts significantly to additional hours. But you, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to communicate these issues. I can't be a mind reader that you're having problems if you don't communicate these issues to your team. They're willing to help you and approve that you could get a home health care company, or that your family could be approved for aid and attendance or the additional hours. But you have to communicate what you're going through. The comprehensive, the family caregiver program, is extensive. There are a lot of different steps to get the family member approved. 18 years or greater. They have to be living with you. They will get paid. And there's 2 different levels, a level 1 or a level 2 stipend to get paid. It's a very good program. The other problem I see and I face all the time that I will get, now this is beyond this, but families will come to me and say, I'm 80%, I'm 100%, I need aid and attendance, I need additional monies, I'm hurting big time, I'm caring for my dad, I'm caring for my husband, and I say to them, show me what you've been doing all these years. I've been caring for them 3 years, 4 years. I had one yesterday, a daughter. I gave up my life. I gave up my job. I've taken care of my dad for 4 years. He's only getting Social Security, and we're running out of money. When I put down on paper the income and the expenses for aid and attendance, what's the expenses, ladies and gentlemen? They haven't hired a home health care company at $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. The daughter didn't cost her dad anything. So guess what? She got denied when she did it on her own with VA. So she came to me and said, why am I getting denied aid and attendance? We have no more money. It's a balance. So now she's going to pay somebody, and we're going to try to do it a different way. To see if we could get her aid and attendance. And Christina knows we go through this all the time. Those are some of the issues we face. If you make too much money, aid and attendance, going back to my Air Force colleague in the back, aid and attendance is non-service pension. It's income-based. It's related to assets. If you make too much money, you're not going to get aid and attendance. But there's ways to do this. If you have a disability and you're service-connected, we could look at things differently. There's service-connected pension. So we have to look at each and every one of you differently. Everyone isn't the same. Dave, if you want, or Christina, we could pass this. This is the latest module that we did on caregivers. It's quite extensive. It is online. I'd like to start one on one end and one on the other. I don't have one for everybody. You could take a look at it or give me a call if you have, questions. We have our business cards out there. I know Christina and I will be around for any questions. Is there anything you'd like, or we could open it up for questions? Yes, ma'am. He served our country, so he served during a wartime era, correct? Okay. Yes. Correct. It's open to all eras. Every team at the VA has your physician, your nurse, your social worker, every team at the VA. You don't, well, your primary is your physician, and I don't know that he or she will take too kindly to say, tell me who the social, ask the nurse if you could talk to your social worker, or go to, do you go to Ann Arbor? Do you go to, okay. In Ann Arbor, I was there go to the third floor, the social work department. Go to the social work department, whether it's Detroit, Ann Arbor, Battle Creek, or Canton, it's one story, ask for the social work department. They're fabulous. And I didn't bring it as a handout, in the, who has,
Going back to Agent Orange, I've got Agent Orange. I've been lied to for about 30, 40 years from our government about it. I go once or twice a year to the Mohs Clinic, U of M. I'm alumni, okay? And they cut the stuff off. And just recently, they're not allowed to say the word Agent Orange. The U of M staff was not allowed to say the word Agent Orange. Now, they started me on a chemo treatment, which they have had and sat on for over 5 years. I went about 20 years ago and the VA turned me down. I haven't been back. I don't like being lied to. Well, instead of throwing money out, the first thing they want to do when they saw my 214, judge me is you can get money for this, money for that, money for this, but no help for the Agent Orange. When are we going to start working on a cure? Because this chemo that I'm doing, and by the way, Blue Cross doesn't cover it. No insurance companies cover it. I'm throwing $100 plus a month out for it. Is that fair? We need a cure, not throw a bunch of money at us. If I can walk in there and they can declare me nuts in a minute and I get a bunch of money. But help for Agent Orange doesn't exist. Still doesn't exist. Nobody's working on it. Nobody is working on it.
I'm back on. Unfortunately, in terms of the research, it's just whatever is the biggest disease and the biggest problem. So because diabetes had affected more people with it, that's where the money had went and they studied that more. In terms of your skin condition, it's probably because it's a more rare condition, and that's the reason why they aren't putting that much money to study it, is because money goes where more people are affected by it, basically. I mean, that's the sad state of our healthcare system. So, yeah. but that's how they do it. So,
If you own a long-term care policy, will that apply against aid and attendance?
Oh, yes. So the question is, if you own a long-term policy, does that count against aid and attendance? And my answer is yes, because all of that is considered as an asset. You look at anything that you could use and consider as money, and that's what they look at. So they don't count a house and one car. But the minute you sell your house, that becomes an asset. And so the number right now that I use for families that I'm helping is $127,000. That's everything. And that's a household. So if you have a spouse, you need to look at your retirement, Social Security, and somebody says, yeah, but I'm the one that's the veteran and I'm sick or I need the help. Why does my wife's retirement or pension count? It's the household. So everything counts, okay? So the other piece of that is if you have investments, if you were fortunate enough to have a couple properties, et cetera, one house and one car get excluded, but everything else counts. And if you think you're going to hide it, another thought, you're not going to hide it. I just had one young son think that he's a CPA, and I didn't know what I was talking about. He was from Chicago, and he was going to take care of his mom and dad, and I didn't know what assets meant. And so he got it after his dad died. He got it for his mom, but then he called me up 4 months later, and he goes, she got kicked out of the program. And I said, I told you that you were not, I had a hunch from the beginning, you know, that sixth sense, that he wasn't telling me about some of the investments they had. And sure enough, the government, they kicked him out. And once you get kicked out because of they think you're lying or fraud, he's not going to get it for his mom again. I think they will increase it. At one point, it was 80,000, and they upped it to 127. The rumor is it's going to go up to something like 138, but I don't use those numbers until I see the Congress has blessed it. Until I see it in writing, I don't take it for granted. Oh, if you get divorced, I tell, listen, wives, if you've put up with them for 50 and 60 years, don't go getting a divorce at the last minute, because then you get nothing. Well, you do lose your benefits. You can't get buried now. You can't. I just had that one too. You think you're going to go to the National Cemetery and you're going to go, no. You get divorced. Now, separated is a different story. That's not divorced. Separated is different than divorced. Divorced, you get no benefits. Any other questions?
Yes, let me bring this to you so we can hear it online. No, the online people can't hear your question.
What if you get divorced and you're going to Holly and your wife remarries? She can't go to Holly then?
No.
Get nothing either.
You get, the big,
Okay, I
the
just wanted to
big
make
key
sure.
word,
I
sir,
divorced my old
is
man and I don't get nothing
divorced, okay?
Yeah.
If you get divorced, she does not go to Holly with you.
If I died, the same thing? If I died and then she remarried, she still wouldn't be able to go to Holly?
No, she's
Okay.
not your wife.
All right, so I'm gonna go home and tell her that today.
Now, so here's a cute story, and this is documented, all right? So there is a veteran out there. So he's pretty tough. It is documented. You could look it up. Find the veteran who had 5 wives. All right, so they will take you 6 down, okay, 6 deep. He got married. His wife died. She got buried first. He got remarried. She got buried second. Got married, got buried third. He had 5 wives, all got married, legally married. They died before him. He is still alive. They already told him. There's no more room. And so, no, they died. Christina just said, is he in prison for killing his wife? No, they've died naturally, but they will only go down 6 deep, so he better not remarry. But no, if you are divorced, you lose your benefits. Yes, sir.
I would just like to comment on that. I was a leadership position at the VFW, and I went to one of their conferences, and Mount Holly's director was there, and he was telling us all about the program. And that same incident come up. And of course, I went back to the Post and reported that back to the World War II veterans. And of course, me being a Vietnam veteran, they didn't believe anything I said. So I looked for some support, I guess, verification that such a thing happened. And I was at one of these summits, and there was from Washtenaw County, I think he was.
Mike Smith.
It could have been. I don't know the name, but he verified that. He said it's not a policy. It's no written policy, but there's precedence because they allowed it to happen. But he went on to say that one of the wives that was placed in his gravesite was remarried, and they had to get a release from her current husband to put her in that gravesite. So I don't know the workings of married, divorced, whatever the case may be. But yes, there is such a case that five wives went into his gravesite.
Well, thank you, Mr. DePaul. But I did not hear about that because that one is strange to me unless she married another veteran, because from all of my times, they're legally, I've been able to work through over the years many, make phone calls and make things happen. But some of these where you get a daughter that says, Mom died, she wants to go with Dad, and I did not know that Mom and Dad got a divorce, to find out, well, sure, they could go to Holly or where Battle Creek, but then to find out they got a divorce, it's like, I can't make that happen. Will you make anything happen? No, that's the law. And so when things are law, no, you can't make them happen. Another sad one that just happened is young man died. He didn't change his 93 when he went to serve, and he got married. The family did not like the wife. They had a child, and he went off, was in either Afghanistan or Iraq. I don't remember that detail, but he was killed in action. On his 93, it left the money to the parents. There was nothing by law that went to the wife and the child. And the parents did not give it to the wife and the child. By law, we couldn't do anything.
How critical is it that the spouse of a disabled vet be on the title of the house?
The question is, how important is it that a spouse be on the paperwork and on the house of a disabled veteran? Well, I think a spouse, and Christina is the attorney, I think a spouse should be on the paperwork for everything. I think the spouse should be on the paperwork at the VA. If you are 30% and greater with a disability, then your dependent should be listed as the dependency and a benefit. I think it should be noted there because when you're going after, I think Christina mentioned it, if there's an option, an opportunity for service connection, survivor's benefits with a service connection, and we have the opportunity to fight for you for that after death of the veteran. I think all of that helps, but survivor's benefits, you know, if you're 100% and the veteran dies with your home, you've got the tax abatement. We've got an ebook on that. How important is that? I think that's really important. Christina?
So from the attorney, it's not that clear of an answer. It truly depends on your circumstances of whether you want someone on the home. It's also going to be, I'm assuming you're talking in Michigan. Okay. State by state, obviously, it differs. Depends on when the home was purchased, but a lot of times, if I'm remembering my property law correct, the wife is already going, because you're married, it's going to be included in terms of your estate to be able to go to the wife and things like that. But that's something you want to consider when in doing an estate plan. It's also going to be something that you've got to consider if you're doing Medicare planning. So that's why it's truly, I don't mean to be facetious, it's really not that easy of an answer to give to you without knowing more circumstances.
If the spouse is not on the title,
The deed.
or the deed, can she continue getting the exemption that the 100% veteran is getting of not paying property tax? Does
And
that
the
make
veteran's
sense?
dead, and the veteran dies, so veteran gets it, veteran dies, does the wife still get it?
Right.
Yeah, I think yours should be fine.
If you're not on the deed, will you still continue getting the exemption?
Well, you're gonna die, so it's gonna need to be probated unless you have an estate, you know, a will and things that kind of handle things. And then ultimately, there is gonna be a deed that goes to her. And then it's gonna
But-
be her house.
But is she going to qualify for the 100%
Yes,
exemption
Yeah.
that the veteran was getting?
correct, because you didn't divorce her, right? Perfect, you're good.
So, as follow-up to that, and we got the supervisor here, and I said hello to Diane when I was walking in, and this is a great community because I used to live here. If that occurs, the spouse takes the notice they get from the VA. It doesn't happen automatically. Your community doesn't call you and say, hey, spouse, you get 100% tax abatement. You got to take the VA form, and you got to go to your assessor in your community, and you got to apply for your 100% tax abatement. But nothing comes to you for nothing. I mean, we have veterans that say, I'm in the VA system for 18 years. Why didn't they tell me I could apply or I could get a disability rating? How come somebody didn't tell me I should apply? They're not going to tell you. The county's not going to tell you to go and get, or a community, a township, come and get your tax abatement. You got to do that yourself. But she will be entitled with that piece of paper from the VA, but she needs to come here and apply.
General, let me jump in here. Now we're at time. So with your permission,
One more question?
I tell you what, we're at time. I want to respect everybody's time. Our guests are going to be up here afterwards. If you have additional questions, please come up. We'll hang around as long as we need to answer your questions. But we are at time for the room and things. So I want to thank our panelists for being here. I want to thank you all for coming and joining us for our 14th Annual Summit. And if you have questions, we've got some books, we've got some prizes to give away before you go. So let's see, our first one, we want to do years of service by each branch. Do you want to conduct the auction here and I'll pass them out?
Okay. And I guess first come, first serve. So I'm Air Force. So could all of our Air Force veterans stand up and, whoa, I guess it's, how many years? 6? How many years?
I was 2 years, but I was.
Okay. Okay. That's our winner. All right. How about Army? Where's our Army? Stand up. How many years? Whoa. All right. Easy. Anybody over 10 years? Okay, 10 years, stand up. Stay up. All right, there's our winner. Oh, Carol Ann, you did that good. All right. Where's our sailors? Sailors. Okay, 5 years. 10. Okay, our winner. Yay, 4 years. Excellent. Okay, do we have any Marines? No Marines? How about Coast Guard? No Coasties. Oh my God, no Coasties. All right, female veterans.
Got one in the back.
Okay. All right. Okay, we got a couple more. All right. Does anybody have their birthday on 9/11? We just had 22 years, 9/11. Anybody have a birthday in September? Oh, that's a prize right there. Happy birthday. I'm glad we took him to lunch.
I'm sorry you spent it with me, sir.
What day? The 6th? 16th? 16? Okay. We got 3 books left? 3 books. Excellent.
I also wanted to mention before everybody takes off, we've got 2 guests here. One is Andy Paris, who brought his amazing ships that he actually created. So if you want to come up and take a look at his ships. And also Susan Arnold is in the back of the room. She's here from New Hope Center for Grief Support. So if anybody has experienced a loss and is looking for an organization to help out, that is an amazing organization. She has some information if anybody's looking for anything as well. And hopefully we will see you back here next year. Thank you.